guys, it's Danny. Today it is the 1st of July, time for another episode of our Care Tips in Bloom series, which is what Orchids in Bloom transformed into starting last month. So today I'm gonna show you the orchids that I had in full glorious bloom during the past month, but also give you some care tips, very basic cultural notes, just so you have an idea if these orchids could be something for you. All of them are very suited for home growing. As you guys might know, 99% of my collection is easy to grow in homes, and the orchids in today's video are all 100% suited for home growing, but of course they are just a little bit different between them when it comes to requirements and other quirks. So get a beverage, get your wish list ready, and if you do end up enjoying this video, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps my videos out, and why not subscribe if you're not already subscribed? I post 3 times a week. Now with that said, let's start. First, let's start with the Zygopetalum hybrids, with which I'm doing quite fantastic these days, finally, after so many years. It was about time. First off, this is Zygopabstia Romy. I'm just gonna call it like that. It has a pretty long name. It's a pretty special Zygopetalum because it doesn't really look like most others. It is larger in size, has very thick pseudobulbs, and also the flowers are bigger. It does seem to me that it takes pretty much the same cultural requirements as any other zygos. For me, the trick was to give them bright shade or artificial light, no direct sunshine, pretty much whatsoever. I'm also growing them in the grow room, which is kind of like a living room. I don't keep them on the terrace, which can get very hot. And recently I switched the medium to more of a terrestrial mix, which so far, so good. It works great because these orchids hate drying out. Zygopetalums are known for their fragrance, and the Romy has quite the scent. It is kind of powerful. To me, it smells very much like the wrinkle stylus Gigantea, a little bit like bleach, to be fully honest. But hey, that's just me. Zygos typically smell really nice. Another Zygopetalum hybrid we had in bloom is the Zygopetalum Barbel Holm hybrid crossed with Paradisanthus. I'm not entirely sure about this ID, but it's such a complex hybrid that I really don't find many sources on the internet talking about it. It does, however, take the same care as all the other Zygopetalums, but unlike the Romy, it is the zygo with the smallest flowers. It also has a bit of a scent, smells like hay or grass to me. It doesn't bother me, but it's not very perfumey. The flowers are really cute, looking a little bit like the miniature Romy. However, this year they didn't last all that long. I'm not entirely sure if it has to do with any of the parents or with the fact that this orchid is slightly stressed. I had it in an epiphytic mix. It did okay, not all that great, I have to say, so I decided to switch it to the terrestrial mix, and we'll see how it does in the future. The flower display will be better as well, and I personally just like tinier flowers more than big flowers. They're a little bit more whimsical, and I am whimsical myself, so I guess that's why. Next, we have a premiere for my collection. It is the first time it blooms for me, although I've had this orchid for the past 2 or 3 years or so. I purchased it as a young plant. This is the very first time it blooms, and I love it. Imagine the big version of an Angraecum, let's say the Sesquipedale, still has that wonderful glorious spur, still has that beautiful white flower, but it smells good. It is a nighttime fragrant orchid just like the other Angraecums, and the scent to me resembles a cross between carnations and daffodils, if that makes any sense. I think it's wonderful. I absolutely didn't like the Sesquipedale scent, but I love this guy. Other than that, the care is pretty similar, and with this guy, I didn't have to provide that temperature drop that I did have to provide for the Sesquipedale and its hybrid. Also, this orchid doesn't sit in the heat of the terrace. I keep it in the grow room with warm conditions, but not hot conditions, and it appears to be doing absolutely great. I give Cattleya type of light, which is pretty bright. I do believe that it can do great in bright artificial light as well. It doesn't strike me as a very hard to keep orchid or a very demanding orchid. Next up, here we have the Wilsonara Habibi Pacific Pleasures. Probably nowadays it is an oncidium. Don't really know with reclassification anymore. And to be honest, I don't really care anymore. It's so tiring to keep up with everything. I'd rather know cultural notes than name changes. Sorry for that little rant. I'm gonna call it a Wilsonara, although it might not be correct. So the Pacific is one of the oncidiums that I managed to rescue last year. If you don't know the video, check the description down below, I'll link you to it. It is a normal odontoglossum type of oncidium in the sense that it doesn't really like a lot of light. I've been growing it strictly under artificial light together with most of my other oncidium types, and it did absolutely fantastic. It likes its water, it likes its air, it's an epiphytic orchid, so I always make sure that I give it the humid side of the oncidium care. I'll link you to my tutorial down below. Since it has the odontoglossum, which is more of a cool grower, it's not tolerant to heat pretty much at all. Wilsonaras are not tolerant to heat. I keep them in my grow room, which again is like a living room, nothing super fancy. So on the plus side, it's on the lower light spectrum for an oncidium. On the minus side, it's on the heavier watering side, more humid, cool air, that side of things. But if I can do okay with it in this very hot climate that I have, which influences my grow room, I'm sure you'll do great as well. It's not a finicky orchid, it looks glorious. Maybe try to repot it at the right time rather than whenever. Next up, we have the wonderful, magical, whimsical Coelogyne usitana. I love this Coelogyne, granted. It is just the second Coelogyne I ever had, but hey, it's my favorite. This orchid is tough as nails. Not many species survived the move to my new country, the lack of medium, the dehydration, the fusarium outbreak, the inorganic medium, all of the things that I did. She went through it, she survived it all, spider mites, everything. But she's still around. Very set back, grant you. It's a 5-year-old or 4-year-old orchid in my collection. It should have been big, it should have been glorious, and it's not. And that's just due to me really not taking proper care of it, but she survived. Imagine that. I grew it in natural light, but also in artificial light. Did just as great, didn't mind at all. However, it's not a very drought tolerant orchid, so when it comes to watering, I treat it pretty much like an oncidium, and you will be able to tell by looking at the pseudobulbs when this orchid needs water. And it needs water quite often, kind of like all the other Coelogynes. Even though it will get severely set back as well, it is very eager to produce new roots, new growths, new flowers even if it's not very healthy. With all of these said, it has a major sensitivity, and these are the leaves. I tested out many products on this orchid because she's sensitive, and I do still have damage on the leaves. It is a spider mite magnet. Nowadays I use leaf shine. I spray it from a distance, just a very light coat just to keep the spider mites at bay, but I don't apply heavy oils or things of the sorts. It doesn't like it. It's also not a fan of Ceramis or semi-hydro. It did awful in semi-hydro for me. I would absolutely treat it like an oncidium when it comes to medium, watering, and things of the sorts. Other than that, it's a joy to grow if you don't make the same mistakes as I did. And another piece of good news, my Coelogyne has finally another direction of growth, and that one is creating a bud as well. Because guess what? It is a sequential bloomer, meaning each flower spike will produce a multitude of flowers. One bud after the other will open, and each flower I think lasts for about 2 weeks. It's not fragrant, but it's just beautiful. Look at it. Super tough little cookie. Next up, a crowd favorite. This is Phalaenopsis Sweet Memory Liodoro. Liodoro is the variety. There are other varieties as well here in Europe. The Liodoro appears to be more popular. And why is it so popular? Because it's fragrant. It has the Bellina as a direct parent. You will find sources saying the Violacea, but that's just because the Bellina used to be a Violacea before it got split into its own species name. So it does smell pretty similar to the Bellina, and it looks absolutely fantastic. It takes the very same care as any other Phalaenopsis, low light conditions, very drought tolerant, home conditions, whatever you like, it will like as well pretty much. And when it comes to blooming, well, it's a bit of both worlds. It blooms for me in the winter. It is triggered by lower temperatures to produce flower spikes, but at the same time, it is in bloom in summer as well. And the flower spikes can be sequential and can last a few years. On the orchid, on mine, flower spikes lasted for 2 or 3 years. Not a whole lot of time, but more than the standard Phalaenopsis. It doesn't create a lot of blooms at once, but whatever it puts out, it's a great and fragrant show. Next up, the Dendrobium anosmum, which is a deciduous Dendrobium species, meaning it loses its leaves once a year and then it blooms. And this year I have a pretty good show. This is a newer orchid in my collection. It's not the old anosmum hybrid that I used to have. So last year, let's say, was the accommodation year. Hopefully next year I'll get better blooming, but hey, I'm not gonna complain. The anosmum is a species which requires bright light during the growing season, lots of watering because it grows really fast, lots of fertilizer. Think of it as a no-bully, but deciduous. It also takes a sort of winter rest break, whatever you want to call it, in the sense that you should reduce watering quite a lot. You should absolutely take out fertilizer from the equation. The temperatures should be a little lower, not very low. It's not a freezing tolerant orchid, but certainly it does not grow vegetatively during winter time. And then in spring, what do you know? Flowers. And the best thing about this orchid is the fragrance. It smells kind of like raspberries. I would say it's a combination with oranges, but it might just be me. It smells really nice, not very powerful, and the flowers are just beautiful. Downside, it only blooms once a year and the blooms last for a couple of weeks, and that's about it. Other than that, you'll have these long canes, which you may or may not like. Next up, a little Cattleya. We took a little break from the Cattleyas because they're kind of recharging their batteries, but they're gonna start next month yet again. So this is a no ID Cattleya, which I saved 4 years ago or something, or 3 years ago. I found it without flowers in a flower shop and I bought it. And it was a tiny orchid and now it's a pretty huge orchid. And I don't have an ID for it. It does take the very same care as any other Cattleya. It's very drought tolerant and grows like a weed. It produces multiple pseudobulbs a year, which bloom, all of them bloom, no matter if she's stressed. And the best thing about it is that it's fragrant. It's wonderfully fragrant. I cannot tell you how beautifully fragrant it is. Not as good as the Princess Jackie, but up there. I love the fragrance, which is a combination between roses and lilies, but it's so strong and so good. It's unique. I love it. I'm so sorry I don't have an ID, but look at it. If you ever see it in flower shops, get it. It's such a good orchid to have. Next up, here we have a hybrid that I know for a very long time. This is Brassada Mivada. And as the name suggests, it is a Brassia hybrid, but look at those colors. It is a beautiful golden color with a lighter lip, creating a bit of a contrast. Not a lot of spots like other Brassias. I just love it. Now, I have this orchid for quite a lot of time, maybe 3 or 4 years, but last year it skipped blooming altogether. It didn't like something, probably the drought of semi-hydro, but ever since I put it in organic medium, it started to grow properly. For me, the vast majority of oncidiums really don't do great in anything other than a moss mixture. It is how it is in my climate. It's not something specific to oncidiums. So you can have great success with other types of media, no problem. But my oncidiums are just kind of starting to take off ever since I switched them all, and you will see in future months. I actually grow this one in artificial light again, although being that it's a Brassia hybrid, it can take some bright natural light as well, but as you can see, it does pretty great in artificial light as well. With this one, there is no perfume. Maybe there is a bit of a scent if you really stick your nose into the flower, like a sort of plastic scent. So if you have problems with super strong perfumes, I don't think this one will give you issues. Next up, boy oh boy, I did not believe I would have this orchid anytime soon because it's an expensive orchid, and yeah, there's always something shinier. Anyway, this is the Psychopsis Mariposa. I purchased it a few months ago. We did a repotting on it. Check it down below. This orchid pretty much always has a flower spike. It is a sequential bloomer, which means it produces flower after flower on the same flower spike for years. And I remember many years ago I read somewhere that each flower spike can last up to 8 years. But you know what? Take that with a grain of salt. It's not my experience, so I cannot vouch for it. It's just what I heard. The most I kept the flower spike on mine was 2 or 3 years, until I moved countries and my Psychopsis was lost in all of the things that happened. It is not tough as nails as the usitana is, but it has a bad reputation that it doesn't like repotting. No, it's absolutely not true. This orchid to me is kind of like an oncidium that prefers a lot of light. I keep it in bright light, Cattleya light actually. I don't keep it on the terrace, but in the grow room. It's not a very heat tolerant plant in my opinion, but warmth, intermediate conditions, they should do just fine. It does like its watering. When it's almost out of water, you will see the pseudobulbs shrivel so much that you will know it's time to water the orchid. Other than that, it's a very, very hardy orchid, if I do say so myself. It's not indestructible though, it's not usitana level. But I feel like articles make it sound like this sort of finicky orchid. No, it's not. And look at that flower. It's out of this world. People say it looks like a butterfly, and I do believe that's what it's trying to imitate. I kind of think it looks like an alien robot with those little antennae and the little eyes and the little armor. I don't know, what do you guys think? It's a beautiful orchid, can be quite expensive for whatever weird reason, but I did manage to find this one at a really decent price. That's why I purchased it. It's not fragrant and each flower can last about 3 weeks. And as long as you have warm temperatures, it will continue to bloom. In my old environment, it used to take a break in the winter time from blooming, but here, I don't really think it's gonna happen. We'll see what happens in the winter. Next up, really one of the highlights of this month, I couldn't believe it. It's a purple orchid that I'm in love with. This is the Phalaenopsis YangYang blueberry, and it's pretty easy to see why it's called blueberry. Mind you, it's the type of color that doesn't really translate identical on camera. So depending on what camera I use, it can look more purple, more blue, more indigo. In reality, it's a sort of mute purple, which is still vivid, but it's a little bit gray at the same time. It's a color that I've never seen on any orchid, any flower for that matter. It's unique and it's a hybrid. And does that fuzzy lip give you any hints to the parentage? Well, one of them is the Tetraspis and the other is the Violacea. So I think we can see what this orchid got from both parents. If you know those two orchids, it got the color from the Violacea, it got the shape of the flower and the fuzzy lip from the Tetraspis, and more importantly, it got the fragrance of the Violacea, maybe even better. To me, this orchid smells really strongly of lilac and cinnamon, something like that. It smells like a Violacea with something on top, which could be a heritage from the Tetraspis, although the Tetraspis is not a super fragrant orchid. And because of the parentage, it is a summer blooming Phalaenopsis. Other than that, it does take the very same care as any other Phalaenopsis. But imagine a multitude of these flowers with that fragrance. It will be divine. I cannot believe I like this orchid so much. I purchased it as an out of my comfort zone type of orchid simply because of the flower, but that color, there was something about it that was really appealing and I'm so happy I got it. It is the highlight of this month for me, just because I'm so surprised. I fully recommend this orchid and it's just wonderful. You should have this orchid, you really should. Next up, another Phalaenopsis, and I have to say I feel like this video again is getting long, but that's just me, I blab. Let's just get used to that. So this is Phalaenopsis tiny Shin fly eagle, which is one of your favorites. It is a Tetraspis hybrid as well. Look at that fuzzy lip. But this one inherited a very nice trait of the Tetraspis C1, which is the ever-changing flower pattern. Do you notice that each flower is similar to the other ones, but it's just a little bit different? Furthermore, one of the blooms has a fully yellow petal. Well, that's because this orchid is very variable with its blooms. You can have fully red blooms, fully yellow blooms, or a combination of red and yellow, dispersed however the orchid feels like. You never know what you're gonna get. It's like a box of chocolates. So I can see why everybody loves this orchid. I love it as well, and this year it has a pretty great show. Furthermore, it has a beautiful fragrance, which to me is a little fruity, a little sweet. It is a crowd favorite, and again, if you ever see it, I suggest you get it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Takes the same care as any other Phalaenopsis, it's just a little bit big, like a standard Phalaenopsis. Next, let's look at some Vanda orchids. First, we have this wonderful orange Viboon. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce the name. Orange Tangerine hybrid, which is just wonderful. This year, the color on the orchid is very, very vivid, but again, on the camera it appears a little bit red, I feel like. In reality, it's not red at all. It's just like an orange. It is a highlight orchid. It is a hot growing orchid. I have it on my terrace. It can withstand drought conditions. It's a pretty tough orchid, but it absolutely needs heat and light. You can get away with just warm temperatures. It doesn't necessarily have to be complete heat, but it does absolutely need light. Under artificial light, I don't know how the results will be. I would stick to natural light for this one. Anyway, you'll find a link in the description that talks more about Vandas, so you can learn more there. But yeah, this is a typical Vanda for me. Takes the same care. It's not fragrant, but it is really lovely. And you want to know why Ascocendas have tiny flowers? Well, because they're a cross between Ascocentrum and Vanda. And here's the Ascocentrum. This is the miniatum. And look at those tiny little flowers. And I think we can clearly see the resemblance here. However, the miniatum is a much smaller orchid. Ascocendas are big because of the Vanda influence in them, but typically Ascocentrums are tinier Vandas, which take the very same care as any other Vanda, but because they're tiny, they can actually be potted much easier. Anyway, I keep the Ascocentrum miniatum in the very same conditions as all of my other Vandas. It is not a fragrant orchid, but it produces a lot of little flowers on these super cute flower spikes. And last orchid we're looking at is an Epidendrum radicans hybrid. This is Epidendrum Sister My Love, which if you're a long-time subscriber, you might already know for a few years. It's not a new orchid. This year though, I decided to put it in a terrestrial mix because radican epidendrums are terrestrial. So far, so good. Again, with this orchid, I had issues with hydration. Being that it's a heat-loving plant, I keep it on the terrace outside in the summertime, and it can dry out pretty fast. So I went for a pot which looks like terracotta, but it's coated, so it actually doesn't leach out water. This orchid doesn't need to get cool or anything, so I don't need unglazed pots. But this pot does retain the moisture. The medium is still airy, even though terrestrial, and on top I put a layer of bark to maintain the perlite hidden, because perlite looks awful after a while. So far so good. It's an easy orchid to grow. You can grow it in a house as well, but if you have a porch or a garden, you can absolutely grow it there as well. It is a very tolerant orchid, even to lower temperatures. The flower show is like a globe of beautiful little flowers, and at some point when I'll have more room, maybe in the future, I will get myself a whole lot of these because they do really great in my climate, and I do want to try keeping them out during winter time as well, sheltered from the cool wind. But since I don't experience freezing conditions, maybe I can get away with it. They are big plants and they're taking a lot of space in the grow room. So that's it for this month. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and you learned a little bit more about these orchids that you saw. Let me know in a comment down below which of these orchids made your wish list. I'm curious. As I was saying, I have my highlights, but what are your highlights? So with that said, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!